Welcome to Spring Point Archives, and welcome to part 2 of Champaign manufacturing history. This article is called Auto's Rise Brought Tool Firm to Neil Green Site by Jerome J. Schloem. It wasn't long after the Treaty of Versailles was signed, and just before the new ICRR station was built, that a firm called the Cushman Tool Company of Cushman decided it was time to expand and promote a new product which was receiving nationwide acceptance. Turning back the clock half a century, one must remember that it was in the early 1920s when the automobile industry started coming into its own. Country roads were being made everywhere. Some were made of brick, others were built faster out of imitation stone or reinforced concrete. Car production was soaring. Horses and buggies were commencing to disappear. Everyone wanted a car. You could buy a Ford Roadster for only $260. Cushman was already making parts and small tools in his little five-man plant at Cushman. Borrowing an idea from the bicycle industry and knowing that every bike was attached with a little leather toolkit, Mr. Cushman envisioned the same convenient toolkit for every new car. It was a do-it-yourself era. Breakdowns, engine trouble were frequent. He sold the idea to the Dodge brothers, Ford Motor Company, Studebaker, and the numerous auto factories located then in Indianapolis and Toledo, long before Detroit became the mecca of the automobile industry. The kit, which folded into a khaki canvas bag, contained a small monkey wrench, a ball head hammer, a complete set of smaller wrenches, a pair of pliers, several screwdrivers, and a spark plug socket wrench. The latter was the most used tool of all because of the low-grade quality gasoline available in those days. These useful accessories supplemented the car jack and tire pump stored next to the spare tire in the car trunk. Cushman Tool Company enjoyed the 1920 inflation spree. More than 200 men, women, and boys came to work, most of them on bikes. I recall walking over a mile each way to work and back, recalls D. Earl Wilson, now a prominent real estate man in Urbana. I lived at the corner of Cottage Grove and Oregon Street in Urbana. It was really a long hike in bad weather, but jobs were scarce. Finally, a fellow named George Deere in Urbana organized our first carpool. For $1 a week, he filled up his Model T Ford with Cushman workers. It beat walking during the winter months. Wage scales in the early 20s looked puny compared to today's standards. Common labor got 60 cents an hour. Carpenters were aristocrats, receiving the fabulous $1 an hour. Earl Wilson started at the Cushman plant for $20 per week for a 48-hour week. The highest paid help were the core makers, whose weekly paychecks ran $45 a week. From apprentice mechanic, Wilson worked his way up in a position as assistant production manager, only to be confronted with panic soon afterwards when the Cushman Company folded. Money was becoming tight. Banks, frightened by the spiraling prices of the late 20s, were starting to call in their loans. I'll never forget the day, reminisced Wilson, when George Cushman called me and Herman Wilson, plant superintendent, into the office to give us the first inkling. Boys, it's getting so we can't borrow enough money at the banks to pay for all the raw materials we need to fill our orders. The banks have stopped advancing money for the orders, which we put up as collateral security. We're so short of capital, I don't see how we can stay in business much longer. Two months later, the G.H. Cushman tool plant closed its doors forever, another casualty in Champaign's industrial program. 2 years later, the Big Depression of 1929-1930 started to hit Champaign. 6 banks failed in Champaign, Urbana. Corn prices dropped to 15 to 20 cents a bushel. Cotton was $1 a bale. During the bank moratorium, Money became so scarce in the Twin Cities that storekeepers resorted to old-fashioned bartering. 5 dozen eggs would buy a pair of baby shoes. Kids were throwing rocks through the windows of the few remaining factory buildings. Published December 2nd, 1968. Thanks for watching.